Hello students, in present video I am going to explain about 20th problem from company accounts topic. I am taking this question from BCom second year semester 3 Pankaj publications book. Previous videos links are available in the description box. Let us see the question first. Problem number 20. A company limited has authorized capital of 50 lakh rupees divided into 1 lakh equity shares of 50 rupees each. The company issued for subscription 50,000 shares at a premium of 10 rupees each. The entire issue was underwritten as follows. X 30,000 shares. Firm underwriting 5,000 shares. Y 15,000 shares. Firm underwriting 2,000 shares. Z 5,000 shares. Firm underwriting 1,000 shares. Out of the total issue, 45,000 shares including firm underwriting were subscribed. The following were the marked forms. X 16,000 shares, Y 10,000 shares, Z 4,000 shares. Calculate the liability of each underwriter assuming shares underwritten are treated as marked applications. This is the question. Let us see the solution for this. Let us understand the question first. See, there is one public limited company, A company limited. Their authorized capital is 50 lakh rupees divided into 1 lakh shares at the rate of 50 rupees each. So one share face value is 50 rupees and the authorized capital is 1 lakh shares. Issued capital is 50,000 shares company issued with a premium of 10 rupees. Means what? Issue price is 60 rupees per share. Issued capital is 50,000 shares at the rate of 50 rupees only. In previous problems also I have explained. So while taking issue capital, we should not consider premium. So issue capital is 25 lakh rupees. So company issued 50,000 shares now. For this 50,000 shares, there are three underwriters, X, Y and Z. So X accepted to underwrite 30,000 shares, Y 15,000 shares, Z 5,000 shares. 30,000 plus 15,000 plus 5,000 is equal 50,000. So this is known as complete underwriting. Means for total issued shares, there is underwriting agreement and there are more than one underwriter. Next, subscribed shares are people applied for 45,000 shares. In these 45,000 shares, with the help of X, some applicants applied for 16,000 shares. So with the help of Y, applicants applied for 10,000 shares. With the help of Z, applicants applied for 4,000 shares. So 16,000, 10,000, 4,000. These three groups of shares are known as marked application shares. So about marked applications, unmarked applications, firm underwriting, underwriting concept, minimum subscription rule, about all these important points in my previous video, in 19th problem related video, clearly I have explained. So in description box, that video link is available. I request you to first watch that video. So total subscribed shares are 45,000. In that, marked applications are 16,000 plus 10,000 plus 4,000, 30,000. So then unmarked applications are 45,000 shares minus 30,000 shares, 15,000 shares. Means 15,000 shares related applications are directly coming from applicants to the company. So on these first three groups of applications, underwriter's stamp is fixed on the applications. Last group, there is no underwriter mark here. So directly these applications came to company from the applicants. So that is the difference between marked applications and unmarked applications. And X accepted to underwrite for 30,000 shares now. In this 30,000 shares, for 5,000 shares, there is firm underwriting. Firm underwriting means what? Compulsory. X wants to buy these 5,000 shares from the company, irrespective of the subscription from public. Similarly, Y, underwriting shares are 15,000. In that, firm underwriting is 2,000. Z, in underwriting shares 5,000, his firm underwriting shares are 1,000. Means in this 50,000 shares issue, compulsory underwriters only buy 8,000 shares. So remaining 42,000 shares are to be purchased by the public. If public is not going to apply for minimum subscription worth shares, then underwriters become responsible. They have to buy those shares. This is the agreement between company and underwriters. And in question finally what is asking us to calculate? Number of shares to be purchased by X, Y and Z. Nothing but underwriters liability he is asking. This is the question. Let us see the solution for this. This is the solution. For this table heading is statement showing the liability of underwriters. Means finally how many shares underwriters have to buy. We are going to calculate that in this tabular form. So particulars, total, number of shares. In that sub-columns are X, Y and Z. So all these numbers are not amounts. These are number of shares. We have to start the solution with the gross liability. So company issued 50,000 shares now. In total column mentioned that. In these 50,000 shares, X underwriting shares are 30,000, Y 15,000, Z 5,000. From this gross liability, we have to subtract marked applications. Because with the help of X, first group of applicants purchased 16,000 shares. So underwriting agreement with X is X has to buy 30,000 shares if people fail to subscribe the shares. In this 30,000, 16,000 X need not to buy. So from X 30,000 shares, we have to subtract. Nothing but we have to attribute. We have to credit these 16,000 shares. So same thing for Y and Z also. Then finally 14,000, 5,000, 1,000. So total market shares are 16,000 plus 10,000 plus 4,000, 30,000. Then the balance is for total column 20,000. For XYZ 14, 5, 1,000. Then next minus unmarked applications. So total subscribed applications are for 45,000 shares. In that marked application related shares are 30,000. How 30,000 came? 16,000 plus 10,000 plus 4,000. So from subscribed shares, if we subtract marked applications, then unmarked applications come. So unmarked applications means what? Without the effort of any underwriter, directly from public, company received these applications. So 15,000. Now these 15,000 shares also we have to attribute to 3 underwriters. Because what is the agreement? If public fail to buy the shares, then underwriters have to buy. Public applied for 15,000 shares now. Then this 15,000 shares also underwriters need not to purchase. Therefore, from underwriters gross liability, we have to subtract even unmarked applications also. But the question is, in which ratio we have to subtract them? In gross liability ratio. So, gross liability of XYZ is 30,000 shares, 15,000 shares, 5,000 shares. So, find out a ratio for these 3 numbers. Common zeros if we remove 3 zeros. Then 30 is to 15 is to 5. With the 5 number, we have to divide this 3. Then 6 is to 3 is to 1 is the ratio. In this ratio, that unmarked applications we have to attribute among these 3 members. Then number of shares to be attributed to X is 15,000 unmarked applications into, in this 6 is to 3 is to 1 ratio, 6 number belongs to X. Therefore, 6 by 10. How 10 is coming? 6 plus 3 plus 1 is equal 9,000 shares. Similarly, for Y, 15,000 shares into Y's number 3 divided by 10, 4,500 shares. For Z, 15,000 shares into Z number 1 by 10 is equal 1,500 shares. So, in this 15,000 shares, 9,000 we have to subtract from X gross liability, 4,500 from Y's gross liability, 1,500 from Z gross liability. Then final balance is 5,500, and here for Z answer is coming in minus. What is the meaning of that? Finally, for X there is a deficiency of 5,000. Means public failed to buy 5,000 shares. For Y, there is a deficiency of 500. Means public failed to buy 500 shares. For Z, there is a surplus of 500. Means public applied for extra 500 shares. So here Z liability is nil. And XY liability, X has to purchase 5000 shares, Y has to purchase 500 shares because public failed to buy these shares. And when there is more than one underwriting, generally what we do is, for any one underwriter, if there is any surplus, that surplus shares also we have to distribute among the underwriters who are having deficiency shares. So here these are 500 shares we have to distribute among X and Y. In which ratio? Same, in gross liability ratio. Now gross liability of X and Y, again we have to calculate. So X gross liability is 30,000 shares, Y's gross liability is 15,000 shares. 30,000 is to 15,000 is equal 30 is to 15, nothing but 2 is to 1. So in this 2 is to 1 ratio, Z surplus shares we have to attribute to X and Y. Then how many shares we have to attribute to X? 500 Z surplus shares into, in this 2 is to 1, 2 number belongs to X, no? 2 by 3. How 3 is coming? 2 plus 1 is equal 333 shares. For Y, 500 shares into 1 by 3, 167 shares. So subtract these two numbers from X and Y balances. Then final figures are X 4667, Y 333, and for Z we want to show nil here. In that case, from minus 500 we have to subtract plus 500. Then the value becomes 0, nil. So what is the meaning of this? X is giving underwriting for 30,000 shares, no? So finally he has to buy 4,667 shares because public failed to apply for this many shares. Y's gross liability is 15,000. Finally he has to buy 333 shares because public failed to apply these shares. Z liability 5,000 shares, he need not to buy anything because total shares are applied by public only. Plus firm underwriting shares we have to add, because compulsory underwriters have to buy these shares irrespective of the subscriptions from public, no? So compulsory X has to buy 5,000 shares, Y has to buy 2,000 shares, Z has to buy 1,000 shares from company. So these three number of shares we have to add. Plus liability for firm underwriting 5,000, 2,000, 1,000. Then finally X has to buy 9,667 shares from company. In this, firm underwriting shares are 5,000, means compulsory has to buy, and as public failed to buy 4,667 shares, he becomes responsible for that because underwriting agreement is for that only. Why? He has to buy 2,333 shares from the company. In that, compulsory has to buy 2,000 shares, and as public failed to buy 333 shares, he has to buy as per underwriting agreement. Z has to buy 1,000 shares. So these 1,000 shares are nothing but firm underwriting shares only. Compulsory has to buy 1,000 now, that only finally he is going to buy. Because underwriting is nil. Public applied for all the shares for which Z is responsible. So Z need not to buy anything here. Only firm underwriting shares 1,000 he has to buy. For these final values, write down total liability. So let us observe this total column once. Company issued 50,000 shares. In that, marked applications are total 30,000. Means with the help of underwriters for 30,000 shares from applicants, applications came. So that number if we subtract, then remaining shares are 20,000. In that, directly from public for 15,000 shares applications came. These 15,000 shares are unmarked applications. Then finally 5,000 shares public failed to purchase. Now underwriters become responsible for this 5,000 shares. So in these 5,000 shares, X has to buy 4,667 shares, Y has to buy 333 shares. Z need not to buy anything. plus firm underwriting shares, total 8,000. In that, X has to buy 5,000 compulsory, Y 2,000, Z 1,000. So this 8,000 also, if we add to 5,000, then finally underwriters have to buy 13,000 shares. In these 13,000 shares, 9,667 shares X should buy. 2,333 shares Y should buy. 1,000 shares Z should buy. So let us neatly present this solution on a paper. This is a table. Heading: Statement showing the liability of underwriters. Number of shares. Under that, total X, Y and Z. First, you have to take gross liability. In question, he is giving the sentence, no, the entire issue was underwritten as follows: X 30,000 shares, Y 15,000 shares, Z 5,000 shares. These three numbers are known as gross liabilities of underwriters. 30,000 shares, 15,000 shares, 5,000 shares. Minus marked applications. See the question? The following were the marked forms: X 16,000 shares, Y 10,000 shares, Z 4,000 shares. These three numbers we have to take here. X 16,000, Y 10,000, Z 4,000. So if you subtract these marked applications from gross liability, then remaining shares of X 14,000, Y 5,000, Z 1,000. Minus unmarked applications in the ratio of 6:3:1. Unmarked applications are how many? Total applications issued 45,000. From that, we have to subtract the marked forms of X, Y and Z. 16,000 plus 10,000 plus 4,000. 30,000 shares. If we subtract from 45,000, then unmarked applications are for 15,000 shares. Unmarked applications we have to distribute to three members in gross liability ratio. Gross liability of X, Y and Z are 30,000 shares, 15,000 shares, 5,000 shares. No, find out a ratio for this. 6:3:1. In that ratio, unmarked applications we have to attribute to three underwriters. So 15,000 into 6 by 10, 9,000 applications. 15,000 into 3 by 10, 4,500. 15,000 into 1 by 10, 1,500. So those three numbers we have to write here. Then from balance, if you subtract unmarked applications, then the remaining value 5,500 and minus 500. What is the meaning of this? For Z, there is a surplus. For X and Y, there is a deficiency. Now Z surplus shares we have to attribute to X and Y in their gross liability ratio. So gross liability of X and Y, 30,000 shares is to 15,000 shares is equal 2:1. In that ratio, Z surplus shares we have to attribute to X and Y. Then X shares are 333, Y shares are 167. So from this balancing figure, we have to subtract Z surplus divided among X and Y in 2:1 ratio. For X, 333 shares we have to subtract. For Y, 167 shares we have to subtract. Then for Z, that minus becomes plus, because finally the answer should be nil. Then the balance is X 4,667, Y 333, for Z nil. To these values, we have to add firm underwriting shares. In question it is given for X, firm underwriting 5,000 shares, Y, firm underwriting 2,000 shares, Z, firm underwriting 1,000 shares. So if we add that plus liability of firm underwriting, then the final liability of X is 9,667 shares he has to buy. Y has to buy 2,333 shares. Z has to buy 1,000 shares. Take a screenshot of this table. Take the screenshot of working notes. Continuation. Working notes continuation. So this is all about 20th problem from company accounts topic. Hope this video is helpful to you. Thank you.